Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This week's video is this piece. I've recently picked it up from Facebook Marketplace. It's very lovely, but it is very heavy also. And I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with it yet, actually. I've got a kind of idea. I also really like the fact that this wood is quite orangey. So I'm thinking I might go opposite to the orange, maybe blues, surprise, surprise. And kind of use the wood as like a bit of a contrast, so maybe something with heavily distressed kind of finish. I don't know. Anyway, we'll see how it goes and hopefully it turns out okay. So the first thing I need to do is to strip the wax off this. These pieces are lovely. They're actually my favourite style of furniture to paint, and they're usually waxed, which needs to be removed completely before you can paint it. And the reason being is because water-based paints do not sit very well over wax. They will absolutely apply over the wax, but over time it will chip and peel and it just won't last very long at all. So that wax has got to be stripped off. The way that you check to see if a piece is waxed, the easiest way is to use your finger. So if you've got nails, I mean mine aren't very long but they're there, is to just get your nail and scratch over the piece. You don't need to do it very heavily. And if you get some residue underneath your fingernail, that is usually an indication that it's waxed. Varnish won't do that. Varnish won't scratch off. So I know this piece is definitely waxed. I've got to take the wax off before I can do anything else with it. So that is what I'm going to do now. It's a good idea to glove up because we're going to be using chemicals just to protect your hands. I don't use gloves very often, but I do when I'm stripping furniture. So the tools that I'm going to start out with using are these scrapers. I've got quite a few. I've got a sort of a small, medium, large. I'm going to start with the large because I'm working on all the big flat surfaces. And all this does, it's very, very sharp. And all it does is take a very fine amount of the surface off. So you can use this to strip wax, you can also use this to strip varnish and other finishes off furniture as well. I just find this reduces the time that I'm spending on the next step. So I just like to take the majority of the wax off with this method first. I think I put my gloves on a little bit prematurely for the scraping because I had to take them off. They were driving me nuts. I don't wear gloves very often because they get on my nerves, quite frankly. They get in my way. I do not like gloves, so I don't wear them. But I've just painted my nails. Well, they were painted at the weekend, last weekend. They've held up pretty well, considering I paint furniture all day, every day. They've only got one chip in them, and I'd like to keep it that way. So I'm going to pop the gloves on. Oh, I just hate gloves. Interesting fact, I used to work on a farm and milk cows, and I never used to wear gloves then either. Most people that I knew did wear gloves who milk cows because otherwise you get the smell of cow manure on your hands, and once you've got manure on your hands, it's hard to get the smell out. But I just could not wear gloves because I hate the feel of them. They drive me nuts. They're just bleh. So I didn't used to wear gloves, so I used to smell of cow manure all the time. That was a nice little story time, wasn't it? So phase one, we've seen the scrapage of the wax. That literally took me, and I've created some content as well whilst I've been scraping the wax, probably less than 20 minutes. If I wasn't creating content, I bet I could do the entire piece in about 5 minutes. So I haven't done it perfectly. There's still some wax residue on here. That's what we need to get rid of now to make sure there's absolutely no wax left on here at all. Because if you do have any wax on, that's basically going to act as a resist to your paint, and your paint's not going to stick. So you need to get it all off. That's what you need. White spirits, mineral spirits, clean spirits. That's what it's called as far as I'm aware. I don't know any other variation of the name, but this is what you need. And I've got a big old tub. It's not very expensive to buy. This is a 4-litre tub because, as you know, I do use this quite a bit because I have to strip quite a lot of furniture because I have a little bit of an obsession with wax pieces. The other thing you need is wire wool. Pretty much any will do. I find if it's too fine, it just kind of goes away to nothing and it doesn't get in there. If you have it too coarse, you end up putting gouges in the wood. So I don't know what this is, I'm not sure, but I would say it's like a medium kind of grit, kind of coarseness, whatever they call it. So yeah, not too kind of harsh, because you'll just dig out big old holes in your furniture. But like I say, the fine one, it's probably best used as like a face exfoliator. Actually, don't do that, it's a bad idea. Oh, also forgot to say, the other thing you need is shop cloth or rags. Rags, bag of rags. Dixie Belle sell these, and they are recycled fabrics, chopped up into rag kind of sizes, whatever a rag kind of size is. And these are great for just all kinds of things for painty stuff. So as you can see, that on there is liquefied wax. So the white spirits dissolves it. I then scrub it to kind of agitate it with the wire wool, and then this takes it off the surface. White spirits can evaporate pretty quickly, so I'll just work in small areas, remove the wax off that area before moving on to the next. Usually what I'll do is keep tipping the piece on its back or sides so that I'm working on a flat surface. That way when I pour the white spirits on, like I've just done on the top, it's not going to run straight off and onto the floor. However, this is an absolute beast. It doesn't look that big, it's not that big a piece. It's just super heavy because it's all solid. Have you seen the size of that top? It is super chunky. So I'm not going to keep doing that because I'll probably pull my back or something stupid. So I'm just going to work on it as it is. And the way that I do it is, it's very simple. I'll just pour some straight onto the wire wool and do it that way. Just be careful to protect your floor if you're doing it this way, because obviously the white spirits is a liquid and it's going to run down your piece and end up on your floor. Mine's already a mess anyway, so it doesn't really make too much difference on my floor. Once you've stripped wax with this method, you do need to clean your piece. I'm using Dixie Belle's White Lightning because it's a degreasing cleaner, and that's because white spirits can sometimes leave behind an oily residue which sits on the surface of your pieces, and that is going to cause a resist to the paint as well if you're not careful. So I always give them a really good clean after I've used white spirits, and then rinse it with clean warm water afterwards. Then I scuff sanded. Again, we've gone back to bare wood. This isn't something that you need to do, but because obviously we've kind of put this thing through its paces with the scraper and then the wire wool, I'm just going to give it a nice scuff sand to make sure everything's nice and smooth and there's no kind of splintery bits sticking up or anything. As I mentioned in the intro, blues and greens are going to be the colour scheme for this piece. I'm also going to use some of the wood, the orangey toned wood, as like a little bit of a contrast, and I'm going to paint the entire thing using a wooden block. This isn't anything special. I literally got this out of my log basket after I'd been splitting wood for my log burner, and it's just a fairly biggish piece of wood that's going to allow me to get quite a lot of the paint on at the same time. You can achieve this look with a scraper. The thing is with the scraper is that you've got a smaller surface area, therefore you are going to probably put more product down, and it's a little bit more precise. I wanted this to kind of be a really kind of weathered, rustic, kind of peeling paint kind of look. So that's why I've gone for a piece of wood this size, because number one, it's going to allow me to get the product down. This is a really quick process, by the way. I was actually surprised how quick it took me to get to the kind of end stage after I'd started it. But like I say, you could use something smaller like a scraper or a spatula, but I find with those it is a more precise kind of placement where you put the paint. This was very random, and also because you're using a piece of wood which isn't completely smooth, you get really random results, which is exactly what I wanted. I wanted this to look really old and weathered and like the paint had been kind of peeling for years. And I decided to try this method because somebody commented on my furniture that I did on the last video and said that they'd created a similar result with a block of wood. I used a roller on the last video. It's literally the last long form video that I did on my YouTube channel, if you want to go and have a look at that if you've not seen it yet. But I kind of experimented with layers and colours using an ink roller. This time I'm using a wooden block. And this is going to give me a little bit more of a kind of weathered look, like I say, a lot more rustic, and I think this furniture really lends itself to that look. The next colour that I wanted to use was Tree Frog Green. It looks luminous here. I'm not sure what's going on with the lighting. Maybe we had some sunshine that day, I'm not sure. I'm using Tree Frog Green, and the first colour that I used was Mermaid Tail. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. But I let that completely dry overnight, and that's because obviously when you're applying it like this with a wooden block, it's going to go on thick in areas. I wanted that look, but you do have to bear that in mind when you are thinking about drying times. I didn't want too much green. I only wanted little bits and bobs of it here and there, little tiny peeps of green coming through. So I didn't go as heavy with the Tree Frog Green as the first colour. Then I let that completely dry overnight as well. So I'd say that probably with this technique, the longest thing you're going to have to wait for is the drying time in between layers, because the layers do go on pretty thick. The final colour that I'm using is Peacock. These are all colours from Dixie Belle's Chalk Mineral Paint range. As always, I will link all the products that I've used in the description below if you want to go and have a look at those afterwards. And then this is the colour that I wanted to use the most of. This is the colour that I wanted to be most prominent. So this was actually a brand new tub, and it was a lot more kind of thinner consistency than the other tubs, because I'm not very good at putting the lids on my tubs of paint, which means they thicken up. Now I like that consistency with paint because I do use a lot of texture and effects in my painting. And it's quite interesting how the different kind of paints applied depending on how thick they were. So bear that in mind as well. If you did want to thicken up your paint and you don't want to leave the lid off like me, you can add a little bit of sea spray texture additive in, and that thickens it up slightly and just means that it holds its texture a little bit more. So as you can see, there's not really a lot of technique or skill involved in applying paint with a wooden block. You can see the layers as they start to come together. It starting to look a little bit more authentic and weathered. There was a stage where I thought this is going to turn out terrible, but as I started applying the different colours, it started to come together. And you could obviously use any amount of colours you could want. You could use 2, you could use 3. I really like this kind of tonal range, so I've kept with kind of teals and greens, but I think this would look really good in loads of different colours. You could create loads of different effects with it. You could also create like a beachy kind of effect with it. It would also lend itself really well to a kind of industrial kind of vibe as well. So to finish it off, once all the layers were completely dry, I got out my electric sander, I turned the power right down, and on my sander I've got a 120 sheet grit of sandpaper, which is quite old. I've sanded with it already, so it has worn down and it's a little bit smoother. And I just turned the power down because this sander can be quite aggressive. I didn't want to obviously take all those layers of paint off, but I did want to distress it slightly and just kind of soften all the layers a little bit more so that it looked a little bit more weathered, and they kind of all melt together and reveal themselves a little bit more. It just looks a little bit more weathered this way. And you can also be a little bit more selective about how distressed you want to be. So if you want to create more of a kind of distressed look, you can obviously take more of the layers off. Just go careful if you are using an electric sander, because it's so easy to go back down to the raw wood, especially because this paint had only been dried sort of not very long at all. I did actually change my sanding sheet at this stage for a fresh 120 grit because I just wanted to expose some of the wooden areas in parts and pull that back to the kind of bare wood, just because I wanted that contrast between the paint and the wood. So you've probably seen me use wax plenty of times before, and I usually use a base of clear wax and then add brown or black wax over the top for shading and depth and definition. However, this time I'm not using clear wax. I am going straight over the top of this in Best Down Wax in brown. No clear wax at all. This is going to give me a much darker, kind of richer tones. As you can see from the paint here, it looks kind of a bit new and fresh. And if I'd have used clear wax, it would have given me a similar result, but I just wanted to do it this way because I really wanted to kind of grunge this piece up. So I'm using brown because I find that it's a little bit warmer toned over the blues and greens. And then once it had sat on the surface for about 20 minutes, I buffed the absolute heck out of it, again with a rag. And what you're aiming to do is to stop feeling that kind of stickiness on the surface when you're buffing. You want it to feel completely smooth and shiny and like there's absolutely no resistance at all. To finish this piece off on the inside, I just gave it a real quick kind of swipe over with Howdy Do hemp oil. I usually use Big Mama's butter for the interiors of cabinets because we can't actually get Howdy Do hemp oil in the UK anymore. I've got a secret stash that I use very sparingly, but I just thought it'd be easier to apply it onto the cloth and just get my hand in the kind of cubbies there rather than using Big Mama's butter. And as usual, there's a few close-ups of all those kind of paint layers. You can just see them. As I say, you could create so many different effects with this. It would definitely work well with a beachy kind of look and industrial, as I mentioned before. You can see there the contrast with the orange toned wood. I think it works really well. And here's the final shot with my newest candles that I'm using in every single piece that I stage at the moment. If you like this video, I'd love it if you could subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Bye.